Welcome to lesson 51 from 5th grade. Today we're looking at multiplying two-digit numbers. And if you look at the screen, you can see that I have the problem 56 times 14. And as you look to the right, we can start to see a little bit of the process of how we actually go about solving 56 times 14. In the end, we kind of break it down and we look at this problem in two ways, right? We see that 4 plus 10 equals 14. So if I were to multiply 56 times 4 and then 56 times 10 and add those two ideas together, I should get the same sum as, or the same answer as just multiplying 56 by 14, because in the end the numbers are the same amount. And so let's go ahead and solve this problem. It says 56 times 4. Okay, 4 times 6 is 24. 4 goes down. 2 goes up. 4 times 5 is 20 plus the 2. On the other side, we're looking at 56 times 10. As we multiply by 10, we know that a 0 is going to go right down, and then we're going to multiply 1 times 6 and 1 times 5 to get this answer. And of course, we can add these two ideas together, and we get an answer of 784. And so we see this process. Now we go over and look at our plain old multiplication problem. We haven't separated anything out, and now let's look and see how we actually go about doing this without taking all this time to rewrite it and separate it out like that. So our first idea is to kind of do a little chunking and handle that idea. 56 times 4, which we already solved for and we know is 224. From there, all right, now we're going to take the second part, which is going to be this idea, surrounded by red, which is 56. And while it says times 1, right, we need to realize that this 1 is in the tens column. So it doesn't really represent 1, it represents 10. And so when we multiply by 10s, right, our 0 goes down, and we go 1 times 6, and then 5 times, or 1 times 5, and then we have these two ideas. If we add them up real quick, we'll see that we have the same answer as what we have right here. And so we use that process to help us solve multiplication. Let's do another one. A teacher brought 25 pencils for each of her 16 students. How many total pencils did she bring? You can see I set up the problem once again, and maybe you notice the grid lines behind it, because we're going to use graph paper the first few times to go through this concept, just to make sure our place values are lined up nice and neat, because if you make that mistake, there's going to be a lot of problems as you're solving this. So you definitely want to make sure everything is neat and in line when doing this idea. So we have 25 pencils for 16 students, so that's 25 for each student, so we want to know exactly how many pencils this teacher is going to need. So we're going to start by taking our first idea, 25 times 6, 6 times 5, there, 3 goes up, 6 times 2 is 12, plus 3 gives us an answer of 150. Next, we're going to take our second column, which we look at just like this. And once again, we're multiplying by 1, but we also have to realize that since we're in the tens column, that 1 doesn't represent a single 1, but instead it represents number 10. So, as we multiply by 10, right, our 0 goes down, and now we can multiply by 1. 1 times 5, and 1 times 2. And we add these two ideas together, and we get an answer of 400. And so we have 400. This idea can also be applied to money. And We can throw in some ideas multiplying by cents, right? It says the grocery store sells eggs at 45 cents an egg. If Sally bought 3 dozen eggs, how much did she pay? So the first idea, if it wasn't drawn out for you, you'd have to understand that 3 times a dozen, right? 3 times 12 equals 36. And so now we have 36 down here because we're going to have 36 individual eggs, all sold for 45 cents a piece. As we set up this problem and we look at this problem, first thing we're going to do is we're just going to kind of ignore the decimal. All right? And so as we ignore the decimal, as we multiply, we're just going to go right ahead into our problem and take our first step, which would be 45 times 6. So 6 times 5, 0 goes down, 3 goes up. 6 times 4 is 24, plus 3 gives us this idea. Okay? Now we're going to look at our next part. Oops. And we're looking at the number 3 this time. But once again, we realize that this 3 is in the tens column. Since it's in the tens column, it isn't a single 3, but instead represents the number 30. So, as we multiply by 30, we're going to put our 0 down. 3 times 5 then is 15. Right? I can cross out the 3 up here so I don't confuse it with the 1 that I'm bringing up to after I multiply 3 times 5 to get the 15. Right? 5 went down, the 1 went up, so I cross out the 3 just to make sure I'm not confusing it with what's going on. 3 times 4 now is 12, plus 1 is 13. Now that I have that figured out, I can add these two ideas together. So 0 plus 0. 7 plus 5 is 12. 2 goes down. 1 goes up. 1 plus 2 is 3. Plus 3 is 6. And we have this number. However, remember this decimal hiding in here? We've got to make sure we go back and put that decimal back in now. And since we were working with cents, right, we have 1, 2 place values, so we want to put those cents back in, right? And so if we look at a number like this, we're going to have 2 place values at the end. We're going to have 1 place value here, 1 place value here. And we're going to put our decimal there. We're going to put our dollar sign there. And we have an answer of $16.20. And so we have this. Then, here is your sample problem. Get you started on this process. And that is lesson 51.